welcome to Homeside Chats. I'm Andrea French, Executive Director for TAG, Transportation Advocacy Group. In today's episode, we're joined by Houston Public Works Director, Carol Haddock. Carol, welcome.
Good morning. Thank you for having me, Andrea.
So thank you so much for all of your service and leadership through really challenging times. We've enjoyed watching your crews do what they do best, which is help keep the city moving. They are the ones that kept moving even through all the times that we were, under the stay-at-home order. They were much more visible and able to see perhaps than on a regular day. And so can you talk a little bit about how your team has really harnessed, the pandemic and really taken charge and been out there on the front line, and what that's been like for you, kind of commanding that team?
So absolutely. I will tell you, it's Houston Public Works over a year and a half ago started down a road, we call it Transform Houston Public Works, but really creating a purpose for our organization and embedding that throughout the organization. And the purpose that we derive collectively as an entire department is together we create a strong foundation for Houston to thrive. And through this pandemic, we have really lived up to that purpose. And when you look at what we do on a day-to-day basis, we have around 4,000 employees, and more than 3,000 of us had to come to the office every single day. I'm doing my Homeside Chat from my office because we have continued to come in every day. You can't fill a pothole from your couch, and you can't run a water plant from your living room. And so those are the functions that we do on a daily basis. We provide water. We provide safe drinking water to help. It's a public health thing on a daily basis, but especially in a pandemic. We take your wastewater away and treat it and return it to the environment. We make sure that the roads are operational and traffic can move, which has been easier because there's been a lot less traffic. But we also have still been out there making sure that the storm sewer systems are functioning because it's continued to rain through this. And then we remained fully operational in our permitting center, even though it was in a different format. So we have been at work. We have been essential, and everyone has been at work every single day. Some working from their houses, but the majority of us working from a facility or a building because our jobs required that we be here at the office and at the facility, or in the roadway or in the right-of-way.
Right. So I really appreciate you kind of going back and talking about kind of the refresh, and perhaps a rebrand of purpose for Public Works. And I think that's wonderful because I don't know that we would have always looked at it quite that way. And I think it's absolutely accurate. And can you share, you never would have imagined that you would have had an opportunity to really have an illustration of that purpose so clearly, right, as we've had through the pandemic. So can you share what you've learned, what your team, you and your team have learned, throughout the pandemic that's been helpful for maybe how it might change some operations moving forward?
So it's really been interesting because it's, each person is experiencing this differently. And each person is important to our team as a whole. And so we've learned that there are things that we have to do in how we come to work. Our field operations normally, it's an industry standard that when you have field crews that you bring them all into they come to the facility in the morning, everybody gets their equipment ready, they get everything ready to go out to the field, and then there's a safety tailgate in a large conference room, and we put everyone together so everyone gets the same safety message and everyone gets the same instructions for the day. And well, during COVID, that's not something that you want to do, is put 50 to 100 people in the same room and do that. So we've had to adjust how we tackle our operations on a day-to-day basis. Our individual people, to be honest with you, the majority of the people that are doing the physical day-to-day work of running a plant, of filling a pothole, of making sure our roadways stay safe of obstacles, most of those people are incredibly resilient people to begin with, and they've just rolled with the flow and adapted to the changes that come at them. And they show up every day, and they're happy to be here at work. They're taking the precautions that are necessary. They're making sure that they can continue to come to work. We have had 3 facilities that have had been impacted by COVID. We've had 3 different crews that somebody got it somewhere and brought it in. And, before they knew they were contagious, we had 3 or 4 people that have been exposed. And at one point we had over 100 people out, either actively fighting COVID or in some sort of quarantine or self-isolation to make sure that they didn't get it or didn't have it. So what have the impacts been to our workforce? It's really been, to me, it's been an incredible demonstration of the resilience training that we've been doing in the last 1.5 years, 2 years, that has allowed our workforce to be so adaptable and still be able to provide full services every single day. It comes to the individual, but it's also what we do collectively when we get together and do it.
Right. And I would say too, Carol, I think it's a testament to your leadership. So it's going to be reflective all the way, kind of top down or top sideways, right? So, you do roll with things. So I think, and you are adaptable. And so they're going to, your team is going to respond in kind to that. So I do say that is something that's very obvious to all of us kind of in the industry, kind of watching from the sideline. So thank you for all of that. And can you share kind of going forward, we talk about reopening, how do you adapt now to that phase, which starts to look a little different? And we're all kind of trying to figure out where we fall into that. And now your crews, obviously, like you said, most of them, they were still going, but now other people are coming. And so how does that start to change
so
things?
and for us, this is actually probably one of the most difficult parts of the transition, because when you start looking at people coming back into the office, back into facilities, these are people that have been isolated, that have been away, that have been social distant just physically by being at home. And we've got people that have been in and out of our building every day the whole time. And so we want to be welcoming. We want them to come back. We want them to feel safe to come back to the facilities that we're in. But at the same time, it's just doing your job at a different location. And so we're having to deal with both the emotional and the psychological and all of the things associated with, it's okay to come to work. We have masks, we have sanitizer, we have, hand washing, we have all those things available to you here. And it's okay to talk to your coworkers, and it's okay to ride the elevators and all those things. And it's a struggle. We have a lot of people that are just physically scared to come back to this building. And, every person you keep hearing on the news, when's the travel industry going to take back off? When are people going to start going back and feeling comfortable eating out in restaurants? It's the exact same scenario here. When are people going to feel comfortable sitting at their desk? And, at some point we have to get back to operating the city the way that the citizens expect, that we're available and we're open for business. But we also have to be respectful of making sure that we're taking every precaution necessary to keep our employees safe.
Right. Yeah. No. And I think this is one of the, as hard as we felt that it was to be catapulted into this, into the pandemic, it is, you're absolutely right. The transition kind of back has surprisingly been harder for me personally too, and my family, and just everybody around me. It is this kind of gray area where we're all trying to find our footing, and so I appreciate you really properly illustrating that for a work environment as well, because I think people are not prepared for that necessarily, and we need to think about that as we navigate this. So also moving forward, we can't not talk about the pandemic, or we can't talk about the pandemic and not talk about the financial impact of it, right? So we know the mayor has talked about a lot of the budget issues. It's plain as the nose on your face, right? That we're going to struggle with some financial issues. Can you share how you have felt impacted, you meaning your department and Public Works, and what that looks like going forward, whether it's related to the CIP or, kind of just operations in general?
So one of the things that I will say, and this is where I always take an opportunity to brag on Houstonians. So the Houston Public Works is not in the general fund like the majority of other city departments. So the water and wastewater utility, the combined utility system, is an enterprise fund where all of the revenues and the expenses and everything is firewalled from the general fund. So the water bill you pay that covers water and wastewater is what covers the operations and covers the capital improvements. And so people are not using less water. Bills are still being paid. So there is really little to no impact on the combined utility system, water and wastewater. So then that leads you over to our street and storm side. And it is funded through the drainage fee, which hasn't changed through the amount of money being collected hasn't changed through this. The portion of the ad valorem that the property tax that goes to pay off the previous debt, and then the remainder comes for projects and for operations. And we will not see an immediate change in the property tax revenue either. So that it's one of the good and bad things. Where we'll see it in the property taxes is 2 years from now. And so we'll be seeing cuts 2 years from now. The rest of the world will be taking off, and they'll be saying, why are you cutting projects? And we'll be saying, well, remember 2 years ago? So that's where we'll see that impact on the street and storm side. But the immediate impact on the street and storm side will probably be the sales tax side for the metro mobility, because we do get a quarter of the 1 cent sales tax goes to local cities, and we get about half of that. And so it goes both to operations and to capital improvements. So as Metro revises their forecasts, we will see that revision impact both operations and the CIP. We don't know exactly what that is yet, but I expect there to be a pretty good hit in that.
Right. And any of the federal relief that's already been kind of provided, has that hit any of your, does that impact or help or hurt or anything with what you're doing on a daily basis, or is that kind of yet to be seen?
So we have had some employees redirected partially and fully to COVID response. And so their salaries will actually be reimbursed. There's a portion of the CARES Act that covers, it doesn't cover day-to-day operations, like our water and wastewater treatment plants, even though it's a critical part of it, because we would do that anyhow. It's not reimbursed. Right. Which makes sense. It makes sense. But the people that have been moved to other functions, absolutely. So what we're looking towards are the stimulus authorizations that we expect to see coming down the road. And that's where we're looking at, looking at our inventory, looking at the things that are sitting there that we could get to shovel ready, that we could get to some way to implement quickly. One of the struggles with stimulus, if it follows previous patterns, is there will be a tendency to want shovel ready construction immediately. But as a local municipality, we don't keep projects on the shelf, because it's just, if you don't know that you're going to have money, projects sitting on the shelf are just going to, they're going to age, and the designs won't be any good. And so there's always this struggle in stimulus to spend the money meaningfully, but to have the projects ready to go. And that's where, TxDOT's actually better at that than us, because they do actually have a routine program of keeping projects ready to go to construction and shelving them for several years. But local cities, and not just the city of Houston, local cities across the board, that's not something that we typically do. But knowing there's a stimulus coming, this is where we can speed up some designs or even select some new designs and try and get ourselves ready for that.
Right. Well, and we're tracking all of that, and kind of the reauthorization, and you hope that this is the time that they actually do a longer term reauthorization. That way people have the ability to plan, because planning costs money and takes a lot of manpower. So we're hopeful for that. And this is the industry that TAG really talks about, this is the industry that will bring the economy back, right? So this is the job stimulus, really huge job stimulus, job creation, and Houston really is poised to take that on. And so that's really what our message has been, is that it is the infrastructure that will get us back. It has in the past, and it will in this moment as well. So can we go talk a little bit about what was called Rebuild Houston and is now Building Houston Forward, or Build Houston Forward, correct?
Build Houston Forward.
Build Houston Forward. Okay. Can you share kind of the status of that and where that's kind of sitting in all of this right now?
So it has not gone away at all, because as we talked about a few minutes ago, so Build Houston Forward is a combination. The public thinks of it as new construction projects. When you
Right.
talk about Renew Houston, Rebuild Houston, or Build Houston Forward, that's what the public thinks of.
Right.
What Build Houston Forward is really it's a combination of the new construction where we're replacing something completely. It's also the rehabilitation where we're
Right.
replacing panels, or we're doing an overlay in a neighborhood, or not potholes, but
Right.
and it also includes the repair, which is your potholes and your skin patches and cleaning culverts on the storm drainage side and inlets and things of that nature. But it also
Right.
includes our staff that perform those functions. So whether it's our staff that are
Okay.
our city employees, or it's our staff that are our consultant partners that are doing the designs, and our construction partners, the contractors that are actually doing the construction,
Right.
all of that labor is included in Build Houston Forward as well. And it
Okay.
was included
Okay.
before we had it in the capital improvement plan, and it was included in our operations. And when it was created, all of that labor was moved with those functions. So it includes all those
Okay.
things. So what's the status of Build Houston Forward? We are continuing to see small growth in the program. We're continuing to see that the debt is being paid down. We are more than halfway paid down in that original debt that from 2012 when we went off debt from the 2010 election.
Right.
And so we're continuing to see increases in the property tax money that's coming into the program. We're continuing the drainage charge is very, very stable. And up until COVID, we had been seeing small growth on the metro side as well. So the funding streams are stable. They're not growing as much as we had originally predicted
Right.
by the consulting community, and then even by the city of Houston in the early days, but it is still growing. And we are transitioning from a rebuild only model to a rebuild and rehabilitate model. And so there are going to
Right.
be some big reconstruction projects, and there are going to be a lot of rehabilitation projects.
Okay.
Those are the most valuable to us because they extend the life of that infrastructure.
Right.
And that's what the mayor rolled out in January when he talked about his street rehabilitation initiative.
Okay.
It was that phase of the Build Houston Forward that's about let's rehabilitate our streets. Let's get our streets back into a better working condition until we can replace them.
Okay. Okay. And that was kind of an inventory, right? And I think that inventory has been completed, correct? If I'm
So it is an inventory, and so based on looking at the condition of these streets citywide, and we put them in two buckets. We put them in thoroughfares, and we put them in kind of local streets, neighborhood streets,
okay.
and basically kind of rank ordered them citywide, and said, okay, based on the amount of funding we have, based on what we should be doing industry standard. I mean, in a perfect world, we would have a rehabilitation program that touched every thoroughfare every 10 to 15 years.
Right.
What we had before this street rehabilitation program is one that really touched every thoroughfare somewhere between 50 and 80 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And that's part of why we when the mayor talked about it, and we completely agreed with him and stood it up. Right now we're on about a 25 to 30 year cycle on rehabilitating our thoroughfares, and about the same on our local with this new program. So it's a significant improvement, but it's still not where we would like to be for the best approach. I would say industry standard, except nobody achieves it, but best practices for
Right.
rehabilitating our roadways. We're making progress. We're making progress. And if you look around town, people are complaining about the construction, but they're also happy about it.
Right. Yes. No, it's the double-edged sword there. Right. So, and talking about that, and then kind of the next phase, obviously COVID will slow some of that down, a little bit. Not, we talk about maybe in a couple years, right? We're going to see some of that impact. If you kind of phase it out, what would be the next kind of mile marker for you in that program, in your mind? What would be kind of if you're kind of metrics, right? I'm just trying to
Right.
think about that.
So one of the things that, so the program that we were developing for the mayor was one that before, well, a year ago, one of the things we were asked to do was to see how much work could we reasonably do in a year on this rehabilitation program. And so we really stood up about $100 million worth of projects, small individual rehabilitation projects that we did around the city, all over the city. And we learned from that what we're capable of doing, what we need contractors to do, areas that we actually need design. Even in rehabilitation, sometimes you need design. And that is what guided this plan that really starts with the coming fiscal year. So that July 1st, new fiscal year kickoff. And so what we have is a miles of roadway target. And we did it two ways. So while we did rank the streets citywide, we also were very careful that it's citywide, but it's the worst 2 miles in each council district versus just the worst 22 miles citywide. And that was one of the complaints we had early on in Rebuild Houston, was that a lot of our projects ended up in District C because they were the oldest streets. And so what we recognized is, yes, we do have worse infrastructure in some areas of town, but we also recognize that every district has bad infrastructure. And so as we tackle the worst in each district, then that district collectively gets a little better. So it's a blend.
It is. It's a blend and a balance. So I would ask too, I would want to know if you could charge our industry and kind of the business community and the community leaders with what are some things that we can do to better support some of these initiatives and some of these programs. Is there kind of an ask, I guess, for our community?
Well, so I'm going to jump back to stimulus for the first ask. Because as I look at stimulus and as I look at how stimulus has come down in the past, it has come down in a way that it's very hard for local cities to have meaningful use of those dollars. If you look back to the ARRA, the American Reinvestment and Recovery Act dollars, we ended up doing the majority of that as overlays and a few panel replacements. And rehabilitation is good, but we were not able to tap into that for any of our larger projects. And it was because of the shovel-ready component. And so I do believe there should be a timeline, but there should be the ability for these local cities to have enough time to develop and implement and deploy a project within the existing right-of-way. And also the other thing that the stimulus money, because of the way it came down, you rebuilt what was there. And it didn't give us the opportunity to move the discussion forward on mobility of transit, of mobility of bicycles, of mobility of pedestrians, of mobility of our vulnerable communities, because the way that it was written, you almost had to build back exactly what was there. And so it's really important that as we look at these things, that we are able to address resilience, that we're able to address sustainability, that we're able to address multiple modes of transportation and not just vehicles. And many of our roads were built biased to vehicles. It's not good or bad, it's just the way it was done. And today we're building them differently. And so that needs to be included in our ability to use and deploy this money, is to be able to address all those modes of transportation, to be able to accommodate all those users.
And I would imagine that that's something that most major cities would want. I would think that would be an ask that, we can't be unique in asking for that as Houston, right? I mean, I think that's something that a lot of municipalities would want.
I believe it would be across the nation.
Okay, very, very good. And then was there another ask as part of that, or was that the big? That's
ask? The big one. That's the big ask. But I will also say that across the board. So one of the things that as we are updating our website on the Build Houston Forward, where we're really going to have that rehabilitation program on an interactive map. It is very hard for us to put out tables for this street rehabilitation program because not every neighborhood in our city has a name that's recognizable. People
Okay.
know what Acres Homes is. People know what Sunnyside
Right.
is,
Right.
but there are many areas in town, and even within Acres Homes, there are dozens of individual small, 4 or 5 street or even 15 or 20 street areas that are kind of a subset neighborhood in Acres Homes.
Right. Right. Okay.
And so it's very hard for us to put that in a table. We
Right.
keep being asked for a table. And so we're going to do it through a map, through an interactive map that you can go in and select and see when would this come up in the rehabilitation program?
Okay.
How many years out do we think it is today? And what are we going to do in the next year? And then it'll have a kind of a progress meter of where are we in achieving what our plan was for the year, and then what changes might be recommended in out years as we look at those things.
Okay, very good. And I would say too that there would be a component that would explain kind of the funding behind where the funding is coming from. Is that that's also part of the website, kind of talking about, so that, and I say that because I remember, in other municipalities where I've worked for departments of transportation, that's always been something that's confused people, is understanding where the money's coming from and what campaigns it's being used for. Because sometimes they tend to kind of put it all in one pot, and then it makes it really confusing to understand why something's not moved or has moved forward and this one hasn't. So I think that's probably helpful communication as well.
Well, Andrea, you bring up a really good point, because one of the things that we did in the last few months, when Rebuild Houston was set up as a dedicated fund, it was set up as a single fund with sub buckets. And so the money went into the single fund, but it stayed in its sub bucket and it stayed with its purpose. But
Right.
it wasn't as transparent to the public as it could have been.
Right.
And so in the last few months, what we've done is we've literally created different funds for each of the funding sources. So as the money comes in, it stays not in a separate bucket with sub buckets. They each have their own separate bucket. And so there is on the website, and there will continue to be, and we would welcome questions, input, dialogue. Let's make sure that we have that website in a way that people get it. But when a penny comes to us from Metro and it goes into the Metro bucket, what happens to it, and then where does it get spent? So that you can actually trace the penny from when we receive it to where it goes.
Right.
That's the goal, is to have that kind of transparency where everyone can say, okay, this project was $4, and $1 came from drainage fee, and $1 came from Metro mobility funding, and $1 came from the ad valorem property tax, and $1 came from Harris County, or whatever it is. Where did the money come from, and how did it get spent on the project?
Okay, very good. Yeah, no, that's great. And for the virtual map or the interactive map, what do you think is a timeline for that that's manageable right now?
Timeline for that's manageable. So there are drafts that are in review right now, and so it's well on its way to being developed, and so we have to have it rolled out before the fiscal year starts. So we're talking, I mean, we're in early June recording this, and so it'll be by the end of June. Now we'll continue to tweak and improve and modify after that, but it will be available to the public by the time the fiscal year starts.
Okay, that's great. And I think, I would love if TAG could host some type of a little bit of a town hall or something, depending on what things look like. I don't know what's going to be virtual, what's not, depending on the month, but to kind of unveil this and kind of kick it off, I think that would be great. And we just took our motion map and put it online last year. And there's got to be a way where we can link to what you all are doing, or at least promote it on our site and our communications.
That would be great.
Yeah, I think that sounds great. So thank you for that, because that's helpful. People want to feel like they can be engaged and help and support. And we'll have some more conversations about the stimulus piece, because there's definitely some things that we can do to help support.
And Andrea, I do want to say one other thing with regards to these kind of rolling out things. I think that everybody feared these virtual types of interactions before the pandemic, because there was just it's cold, it's impersonal, it's, there's all sorts of different opinions that we had, that we need to allow people to come together in a room. And I'm really hopeful that as we come out of this, that we end up with a blend where maybe we are coming together in a room that's jointly live streamed through Teams or Zoom, or, you know, and so if you can't get there because you're at your kid's swim practice, or because, you know, you're working late, or heck, because you're traveling, that you can still tune in and get the experience of what's going on at the meeting, but not physically have to be in the room. And for those people that want to be in the room, great. But for those people that can't or don't want to be in the room, you know, I'm looking forward to what comes out of this as far as a blended technology, in-person solution to these things.
Yeah, no, we've had a lot of conversations about that, because you want to, it's an equity conversation too, now that we're kind of walking into with things, because people absolutely are not going to be able to, in many cases, be physically in a room, right? For a myriad of reasons, but also, I mean, there's an efficiency factor to it. There's a communications factor to it, where you can reach a larger audience as well, and disseminate
and transparency.
Right, and transparency. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Well, I think this has been a great deep dive into public works, and I mean, you all are busy.
We are.
With a capital B, and you know, really appreciate everything that you're doing. Also, everything that you're doing to represent Houston. I know you've been involved in some national discussions and kind of best practices and things like that. So really appreciate that you're always representing Houston very well. And, you know, I would close with a question. We had a great trivia night with you.
We did.
So much fun. There's going to be, I mean, I was going to rotate people, celebrity hosts, but you all did it so great. I don't know. You set the bar really high. So I know there's going to be a demand for another one at some point, but we had an opportunity to learn a lot about you. And I would ask, though, if there was one thing that you personally have learned about yourself through all of this, if you could share that with us. And I know I'm putting you on the spot, but
it's okay. So people, when I say this, people always laugh at me and say there's no way. I'm really an introvert. And
I'm not going to laugh, but I am surprised.
and to me, the difference between an introvert and an extrovert, and how I tell the difference, you know, it's where you draw your energy from. I don't draw my energy from those interactions. And so when I stepped into this role, I underestimated the amount of energy that it was going to take because of the interactions that became necessary filling this role. And there are days I go home and my husband will come home from work and I am literally sitting in the living room, on the couch, in the dark, in a ball, you know, just recovering my energy.
Yeah.
And so what I will say is that self-care has become a higher priority through this COVID pandemic. Not just the washing the hands and wearing the masks and using the hand sanitizer, but the and there have been a few times that I've been drifting away because I'm not necessarily taking the time to recognize, you know, we're focused on so many things, focused on doing so many things, making so many decisions, making sure we have resources and all those things. But if each one of us is not functioning at our highest and best level, we're not doing everything that we could be doing. And part of that functioning at our highest and best level is making sure we're taking the time to make sure we're taking care of ourselves. And so, you know, if there's any one thing, you know, you asked about getting to know me better, is that I need to listen to my body, and I need to listen to my closest friends and advisors when they say, "Are you okay?" And not brush them off and say, "I'm fine, leave me alone." You know, let's get to work. But to actually use that network that you build and use it to keep you healthy, use it to keep you functioning so that you can continue to support the team in the way that you need to. And so for me, the biggest thing out of this is how quickly it went from manageable levels to levels that you needed to not just manage, but that you needed to allow the appropriate time to respond and let it happen and take care.
Yeah, no, that's a great message for everybody. And like you said, we've all experienced this differently, but I think that's a message that resonates with everybody. So thank you for that. And thank you for your time today. I hope that you do find some recharge time this weekend. And we look forward to continued conversations and partnerships, and we'll definitely follow up on some of those items that we talked about and how we can support you and help in Public Works. So thank you,
Thank you
Carol.
very much.
Thank
you.
That was Homeside Chats. We hope you enjoyed our program today. This series would not be possible without the support of our 2020 Mobility Partners. We thank you so much for your support and membership. Stay tuned for more episodes of Homeside Chats coming soon.